A cruel prank. A crowded restaurant. A plus-size virgin sits alone until the most feared man in the city takes the seat across from her and the whole room shuts up. Then tires screech. Gunfire tears the night. He shields her with his body and takes her to a glass and steel penthouse with rules, guards, and a promise. She is safe with him. But safety has a price. A key from her late mother unlocks ledgers that can burn the city. A rival wants her as bait. And the hidden truth cuts the deepest. The boss already owns her building and has been watching to keep her alive. Protection or control? As enemies close in and heat turns to hunger, one choice will crown a king or start a war. When the joke becomes a vow, will she claim her power or become his favorite target? Through the polished glass doors of the brasserie, the Manhattan night sparkled with city lights. Marin's heels clicked against marble as she walked beside Corrado, his tall frame casting a shadow that seemed to shield her from the stairs burning into her back. The silk of her navy dress whispered against her curves, a dress she'd chosen with such hope for this evening, now a reminder of cruel intentions. Corrado's presence beside her was like a controlled storm, perfectly still yet crackling with lethal potential. His Italian wool suit caught the warm glow of the entry sconces, but his eyes remained winter cold as they swept the street with practiced precision. Behind them, the coworkers who'd orchestrated this blind date pressed against the restaurant's windows. Their laughter had died the moment Corrado had claimed the chair across from Marin, replacing their entertainment with something far different than they'd planned. "Your colleagues seem unusually interested in our departure," Corrado noted, his voice low and smooth as aged whiskey. His hand hovered near, but didn't quite touch the small of her back as they approached the door. "Let them look," Marin replied quietly, chin lifted. The hurt still stung, but she refused to let it curve her spine or dim her eyes. "They wanted a show, just not this one." A ghost of approval flickered across Corrado's severe features. He'd watched her throughout dinner, how she'd maintained perfect composure while ordering dessert, how she'd met his gaze without flinching when he'd interrupted their little game. Now he observed how she walked beside him without shrinking, despite the weight of attention on them both. The crisp autumn air kissed their faces as they stepped outside. A sleek black SUV idled at the curb, its engine a steady pulse in the symphony of city noise. Rocco materialized from the shadows, his broad shoulders blocking the wind as he assessed the street with military efficiency. "All clear," he murmured, though his hand remained casually near his jacket. The light caught the silver at Corrado's temples as he paused, turning slightly toward Marin. "Allow me to offer you a ride home." It wasn't quite a question, but neither was it a demand. Marin caught the subtle shift in his stance, protective rather than possessive, giving her space to choose while clearly preferring she accept. "Thank you, but I'll take a taxi," she said, appreciating the offer, but trusting her instincts. "I've already imposed on your evening enough." "You've imposed nothing," Corrado countered, his Italian accent wrapping around the words. "They imposed. You handled it with remarkable grace." A taxi conveniently approached, its yellow body gleaming under streetlights. Before Marin could raise her hand, Rocco had already signaled it to stop. The efficiency of their teamwork was striking, one fluid movement between commander and lieutenant. "The reservation wasn't real, you know," Marin found herself saying, though she wasn't sure why she felt compelled to explain. "They set it up as a joke, the blind date who'd never show." "I know." Corrado's expression darkened fractionally. "I heard them placing bets at the bar. Their mistake was making them within my hearing." The taxi pulled to a smooth stop. Rocco opened the back door, positioning himself so his body blocked any clear sight lines from the restaurant windows. The consideration in their actions, protecting her dignity even now, made Marin's throat tight. "Thank you for dinner," she said softly. "And for—" She gestured vaguely, encompassing the evening's rescue. "The pleasure was mine." Corrado reached into his jacket, movements deliberate to avoid alarming her. He extracted a business card, heavy cream cardstock with elegant black embossing. "If you ever require anything, assistance, a dinner companion, someone to make certain individuals regret their choices, you need only call." Their fingers brushed as she accepted the card. His skin was warm, hands powerful but controlled. Everything about him spoke of contained strength, like a blade sheathed in silk. "I handle my own problems," Marin said, though she tucked the card carefully into her clutch. "Of course you do." That ghost of approval returned. "Consider it a resource, not a rescue." The taxi driver cleared his throat discreetly. Marin moved a step past Rocco, then paused. They'll talk tomorrow, about seeing me leave with you. Let them, Corrado echoed her earlier words, something dangerous flashing in his eyes. Though I doubt they'll do so for long. Marin didn't ask what he meant. Some questions were safer left unasked. She slid into the taxi's leatherback seat, arranging her skirt with careful movements that betrayed none of the evening's emotional turbulence. Rocco closed the door with gentle precision, then stepped back to flank his boss. Through the window, Marin watched Corrado lift his chin fractionally, a silent acknowledgement of her dignity, her strength. She returned the gesture, equally subtle. The taxi pulled away from the curb, leaving the two men backlit by the brasserie's warm glow. In the rearview mirror, Marin caught a final glimpse of Corrado's tall figure still watching her departure. His stance reminded her of ancient statues, beautiful, immovable, and carrying warnings carved in stone for those who knew how to read them. Behind him, through the restaurant's windows, her co-workers had finally begun to disperse, their entertainment concluded. But their faces held something new now. Not mockery, but the dawning realization that their little joke had backfired spectacularly. They didn't know exactly who Corrado was, but they clearly recognized power when it claimed a seat at their table. Marin smoothed her fingers over the business card in her clutch, feeling the raised letters beneath her skin. She hadn't needed rescue tonight, but he'd offered something different. Respect, wrapped in danger. A resource, not a savior. The city lights blurred past her window as the taxi merged into traffic, carrying her away from an evening that had begun with humiliation, but ended with something far more intriguing. Her co-workers had wanted to make her feel small. Instead, they'd accidentally introduced her to a man who made the world shrink around him, and who had chosen to share her table, order her dessert, and ensure she left with her head high. The night air carried a bite of autumn chill as they stepped onto the sidewalk. Marin's heels clicked against concrete, while whispers followed from the restaurant's entrance. Her co-workers huddled near the door, phones raised to capture her departure with the mysterious stranger. A sharp gasp cut through their murmurs. The ringleader, Sarah from accounting, stared at her shattered iPhone on the pavement. The screen splintered into a spider's web of cracks, bits of glass twinkling under streetlights. But I was holding it properly, Sarah stammered, face flushing as she knelt to gather the pieces. Rocco's expression remained neutral, but his slight shoulder adjustment betrayed the careful precision of whatever move he'd made. Corrado didn't even glance back, his attention fixed solely on Marin. Their entertainment ends now, he said quietly, steel threading through his accent. As does their employment, should you wish it. Marin's spine stiffened. I don't need someone fighting my battles. This isn't Pretty Woman, and I'm not looking for a wealthy savior. No, Corrado agreed, something warming in his eyes. You're far more interesting than that. They reached the corner where his SUV idled, its black paint gleaming like oil. The driver's door opened slightly, ready for a quick departure if needed. Everything about Corrado's operation spoke of preparation, of contingencies within contingencies. Let me take you to dinner, he said. A real dinner, without audience or agenda. Just two people sharing a meal. Why? Marin challenged, refusing to be dazzled by his quiet authority or the way his tailored suit emphasized his powerful frame. Because I'm a charity case? The fat girl who needed rescuing? Because you didn't need rescuing, Corrado corrected. You stayed for dessert despite their cruelty. You held your ground with grace. That interests me far more than any physical attribute. Heat crept up Marin's neck, but she shook her head. I appreciate the gesture, but no. This isn't my world, and I won't see you again. The world adjusts to what I want in it. His voice carried absolute certainty. And I want... Boss. Rocco approached with swift, economical steps, a leather portfolio in his hands. We have confirmation on the ledgers, 3 sets missing from the vault. The Kincaid situation is destabilizing faster than projected. Corrado's jaw tightened fractionally, but his eyes never left Marin's face. The portfolio remained unopened in Rocco's grip, urgent business suspended in the gravity well of this moment. I have resources, Corrado said softly. Connections. The ability to ensure tonight's humiliation never repeats. I have my own resources, Marin countered. My dignity, my independence, the ability to handle my own life without owing anyone anything. A muscle flexed in Corrado's cheek, frustration or admiration she couldn't tell. Before he could respond, the night split with the screech of tires. Headlights blazed at the intersection, far too fast, aimed directly at the corner where they stood. Marin's breath caught. Time stretched like pulled taffy as her mind registered details in crystalline clarity: the metallic gleam of the approaching vehicle, the sharp intake of Rocco's breath, the way Corrado's body was already moving. He stepped forward, shoulders squaring as he positioned himself between Marin and the oncoming threat. One hand reached back, fingers brushing her waist with careful strength as he guided her toward the waiting SUV. The rear door swung open, Rocco already in motion to assist. The approaching headlights grew larger, twin suns bearing down on their position. Corrado's frame was solid against the glare, his shadow stretching across Marin like a shield. His fingers remained steady at her waist, neither grabbing nor forcing, offering protection while still allowing her choice. The night had started with a cruel joke, transformed into an unexpected encounter, and now balanced on the knife's edge of something more dangerous. Marin stood caught between Corrado's warmth and the SUV's waiting sanctuary, time compression making each second stretch eternal as the threat barreled closer. Around them, her co-workers scattered from the sidewalk like startled birds, phones forgotten as survival instincts kicked in. Sarah abandoned her shattered iPhone, scrambling back toward the restaurant's false safety. The brasserie's warm lights seemed suddenly distant, belonging to a different world than this moment of stretched time and approaching danger. Corrado's body remained perfectly still despite the imminent threat, only his fingers moving in the slightest pressure against Marin's waist. The gesture spoke volumes. He would protect her with his life, if necessary, but he wouldn't force her choice. Even now, with death potentially bearing down, he respected her agency. The SUV's engine rumbled louder, driver ready for instant action. Rocco's hand gripped the doorframe, muscles coiled to assist. Every element of Corrado's team moved with practiced precision, a well-oiled machine snapping into crisis response. But Marin's world had narrowed to simpler things. The steady pressure of Corrado's fingers, the heat of his body contrasting with the autumn chill, the way he'd positioned himself without hesitation between her and harm. He wasn't trying to save her. He was giving her options, backing her play whatever she chose. The headlights grew brighter, engine roaring as the vehicle accelerated toward the corner. Loose papers swirled in the street, caught in the approaching wind tunnel. The night seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next moment to break. Marin felt the weight of the business card in her clutch, heard the echo of Corrado's words about resources versus rescue. Everything about him radiated dangerous capability, yet he'd spent the evening ensuring her dignity remained intact. Now he stood between her and threat, offering protection without demanding surrender. The vehicle's engine screamed closer, headlights washing the scene in stark shadows and burning light. Time compressed to this singular instant. Corrado's hand at her waist, the open SUV door, and the choice that would determine what happened next. The night exploded in a staccato of gunfire. Glass shattered and bullets sparked off concrete as Corrado's body moved with lethal grace, shoving Marin into the SUV's open door. She landed hard on the leather seat as more shots cracked through the air. Through the windshield, she watched Corrado draw his weapon with fluid precision. His stance shifted subtly, predator rather than protector, as he returned fire in controlled bursts. Each shot deliberate, each movement economical. The attacking vehicle swerved under his assault, tires squealing against asphalt. "Clear the zone," he commanded, voice arctic. "Secondary team, cut them off at Madison." Rocco was already moving, speaking rapid-fire Italian into a phone as he circled the SUV's hood. More vehicles materialized from side streets, black SUVs with tinted windows that boxed in escape routes with choreographed efficiency. Marin's world narrowed to snapshot moments: the metallic taste of adrenaline, the acrid smell of gunpowder, the way Corrado's suit jacket pulled tight across his shoulders as he aimed. His expression never changed, features carved from marble as he tracked targets through the chaos. The attacking car fishtailed around the corner, leaving burning rubber and bullet holes in its wake. Corrado lowered his weapon, scanning the street with predatory focus. That's when Marin saw it, a dark splash of red staining his white shirt cuff. Blood made real, violence made tangible. He slid into the SUV beside her, door closing with quiet finality. "Drive," he ordered, and their driver pulled smoothly into traffic as sirens began wailing in the distance. "Status?" Corrado asked, checking his weapon before holstering it beneath his jacket. "Clean exit route confirmed," Rocco reported from the front seat. "Secondary team in pursuit, no civilian casualties." Marin watched Corrado's fingers absently brush his bloodied cuff. The gesture seemed unconscious, at odds with his absolute control. His other hand remained near her on the seat, not touching, but ready to shield if needed. They saw you with me, he said, voice gentle despite its steel undertone. You can't go home tonight, or for several nights. I have work tomorrow, Marin protested, proud that her voice remained steady. My cat needs feeding. My life doesn't stop because your life stops if they decide to use you against me. The words fell like stones between them. I won't risk that. The SUV glided through Manhattan traffic, other vehicles mysteriously finding reasons to change lanes at their approach. Marin watched familiar streets blur past, feeling increasingly untethered from her normal reality. The penthouse has comprehensive security, Rocco offered from the front seat. We can have Ms. Hale's necessities delivered within the hour. Make it happen, Corrado ordered. His phone buzzed with incoming messages, but his attention remained fixed on Marin. What else do you need? She wanted to say she needed her freedom, her routine, her carefully constructed independence. Instead, she thought of the blood on his cuff and the casual way he'd put himself between her and bullets. My cat, she said finally. I won't leave her alone. Something softened fractionally in Corrado's expression. Rocco? Already noted, boss. Team 3 will retrieve the cat and supplies. The SUV pulled into an underground garage beneath a towering glass high-rise. Armed men in suits materialized from shadow, taking positions as Corrado helped Marin from the vehicle. His hand at her lower back was warm through her dress as he guided her to a private elevator. Inside, mirrors reflected them infinitely. Her in her date dress, him with his bloodied cuff, both looking somehow removed from normal reality. Marin watched their multiplied reflections and made herself two promises. She would not cry in front of this dangerous man, and she would not beg for release she knew he wouldn't grant. You will be safe here, Corrado said as they ascended. Not a promise of freedom or normality, just safety. His honesty was its own kind of comfort. The elevator rose smoothly past floor after floor. Marin's ears popped slightly as they climbed. She focused on breathing, on maintaining composure, on not thinking too hard about how her quiet life had exploded into gunfire and blood-stained cuffs. Corrado watched her in the mirrored walls, his expression unreadable. I know this isn't what you wanted, he said finally, but I won't apologize for protecting what's mine. I'm not yours, Marin replied automatically, then tensed, but he only smiled, small and sharp. You're under my protection, he corrected smoothly. That makes you mine until the threat is neutralized. The elevator slowed to a whisper-quiet stop. Doors parted on hushed luxury, a penthouse foyer in cream and silver, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Manhattan's glittering skyline. The city stretched below, like earthbound stars, beautiful and distant. Marin's heart thundered against her ribs as she stepped into this rarefied space. Everything spoke of money and power, the art on the walls, the marble under her feet, the subtle security cameras tracking movement. A sanctuary built high above normal concerns, wrapped in bulletproof glass and staffed by shadows with guns. Corrado moved past her, issuing rapid instructions to unseen security personnel through an earpiece. His voice was clipped, professional, expecting instant compliance. This was his natural habitat, commanding from on high, controlling the chess pieces below. The guest suite is this way, he said, turning back to her. We'll have your things brought up shortly. He gestured down a hallway of closed doors, waiting for her to precede him. Marin took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. One step, then another. She could feel Corrado behind her, his presence both threatening and reassuring. The night's events felt surreal, the cruel blind date, his unexpected intervention, gunfire and blood, and now this gilded cage. The guest suite door opened onto sophisticated comfort. Pale walls, cloud-soft bed, another wall of windows showing the glittering city. A sanctuary and a prison both, depending on perspective. Marin's fingers twisted in her skirt as she took it in, mind racing between practical concerns and larger fears. The guest suite door clicked shut behind Marin with quiet finality. She stood for a moment, taking in the space that would be her gilded prison. Everything breathed understated wealth, cream walls, plush carpeting, furniture that probably cost more than her annual salary. But it was the details that made her pause. The closet held clothes in her exact size. Not just any clothes, but styles she'd favor. Soft sweaters in jewel tones, wrap dresses that flattered curves, comfortable loungewear in breathable fabrics. In the bathroom, her preferred shampoo brand sat alongside her usual face wash. Even her specific shade of concealer waited in a drawer. They've been watching me, she murmured, fingers trailing over a cashmere sweater, identical to one she'd lingered over online last month, but couldn't justify buying. The kitchen proved equally unsettling in its precision. Her favorite tea, the exact brand of oat milk she used, even the dark chocolate-covered almonds she treated herself to after rough days. The thoroughness was both impressive and terrifying. A knock at the door made her jump. A woman entered, tall, elegant, with Corrado's dark coloring but warmer eyes. "I'm Lydia," she said simply. "Corrado's sister and your liaison while you're here." Marin straightened her spine. "You mean my warden?" Lydia's laugh was surprisingly genuine. "I prefer protection coordinator, but I understand the sentiment." She moved to the kitchen, efficiently starting coffee. "Let's establish the ground rules." "I'm allowed rules." Marin couldn't keep the bite from her voice. "You're allowed whatever keeps you safe while maintaining your dignity," Lydia corrected. "Phone calls are permitted but monitored. Doors unlock during daylight hours. You have access to the gym, library, and common areas. A security team rotates the perimeter every 4 hours. And the cameras." Marin gestured to the subtle lenses in the corners. "Standard security protocol. They monitor entry points in common spaces only, not private areas." Lydia passed her a coffee mug. "You're not a prisoner, Marin. You're a protected asset." "Because of Eamon Kincaid?" The name dropped between them like a stone. Lydia's expression sharpened. "You know him. I know of him. Irish mob boss, owns half the docks, has a habit of making rivals disappear." Marin wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "What does he want?" "The ledgers. Old-school account books that prove certain inconvenient truths. He's been grabbing for them, trying to destabilize the city's power structure." Lydia watched her carefully. "Tonight wasn't random. Being seen with Corrado made you a target." Marin absorbed this, mind already cataloging details. The balcony door's hinges were well-oiled, the drop survivable with proper equipment. The service elevator would have less security than the main one. Camera blind spots existed if you knew where to look. "I need to get some things from my apartment," she said carefully. "A team's already there, packing essentials." Lydia's tone was gentle but firm. "Your cat will be here within the hour." Marin nodded, then retrieved her purse, the one thing she'd managed to keep with her through the chaos. From it, she pulled a small wooden box, worn smooth with handling. Her mother's keepsakes, carried always since the funeral last year. "May I have some privacy?" she asked. Lydia nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Press the intercom if you need anything. Someone's always monitoring." Alone again, Marin settled on the bed and opened the box. The familiar items brought comfort: her mother's favorite bracelet, dried flowers from her hospital room, old photos, and various papers she hadn't had the heart to sort through yet. A folded note caught her attention, one she'd overlooked before. Her mother's distinctive handwriting mentioned a safety deposit box at First Manhattan Bank, opened decades ago. Marin frowned, trying to remember if her mother had ever mentioned it. The city glowed beyond the windows, a tapestry of lights and shadows. Unable to sleep, Marin found herself on the balcony at 2 a.m., wrapped in a borrowed cashmere throw. The air held autumn's bite, but the view captivated her. Streets reduced to light trails, buildings transformed into pillars of starlight. A coffee cup sat cooling on the small table beside an empty chair, evidence of Corrado's earlier presence. Now he was out there somewhere, cleaning the block, as Lydia had euphemistically put it. Marin tried not to think about what that meant, about blood on crisp white cuffs and the precise way he'd handled his gun. Instead, she watched the city breathe below her, mind turning over the banknote in her pocket. Such a small thing, probably meaningless, but her mother had kept it for a reason. The same mother who'd taught her to always have an escape plan, to keep emergency cash in 3 different places, to trust her instincts when something felt wrong. The night air carried distant sirens and the eternal hum of traffic. Marin pulled the borrowed cashmere tighter, wondering how many other women had stood on this balcony, watching the city lights and planning their escape. The thought of Corrado's previous protected assets made something twist in her chest, something that felt uncomfortably like jealousy. She pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on practical matters. The guest suite's layout, the security rotations Lydia had mentioned, the way the service corridor intersected with the main elevator bank. She memorized the guards' faces as they passed on their rounds, noted which ones favored their right side, which ones checked their phones too often. The coffee cup beside her had stopped steaming entirely now, black liquid reflecting the city lights like oil. Somewhere out there, Corrado was ensuring her safety with methods she didn't want to contemplate. Somewhere out there, Eamon Kincaid was planning his next move, and here she stood, caught between powers she hadn't asked to tangle with, holding a forgotten banknote that might mean nothing at all. Manhattan stretched endlessly before her, a glittering maze of possibility and threat. Marin traced her finger along the balcony rail, measuring distances, calculating angles, planning for contingencies she hoped she wouldn't need. The night air whispered secrets she couldn't quite catch, and dawn felt very far away. The first rays of sunlight painted Manhattan's skyline in shades of rose and gold when the elevator doors whispered open. Marin turned from the window to find Corrado stepping into the penthouse, his presence filling the space like smoke. His suit was immaculate as ever, but his right hand bore fresh bruises across the knuckles. "You're up early," he said, voice low and controlled. In his left hand, he held a paper bag that released wisps of warm, buttery scent. "I never went to sleep." Marin wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware she was still in yesterday's clothes. He crossed to the kitchen island, setting down the bag and extracting a perfectly flaky croissant. "You should eat." "I should leave." "You can't." The words were flat, factual. "Your name is already on lists that get people killed. Walking out that door paints a target on your back." Marin's spine straightened. "So I'm a prisoner?" "You're protected." "Without my consent." Corrado's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "Would you prefer I left you to Kincaid's mercy?" "I'd prefer having a choice." She moved to the kitchen island, maintaining distance but refusing to back down. "If I'm forced to stay, I want terms." Something flickered in his eyes, approval, maybe, or amusement. "Name them." "Privacy in the guest suite, no cameras, no monitoring." She held his gaze. "The doors stay unlocked during daylight hours, and each night you answer one question honestly, about anything I ask." He studied her for a long moment, and Marin fought the urge to fidget under that intense focus. Finally, he nodded. "Agreed." The easy acquiescence surprised her. "Just like that?" "Just like that." He pushed the croissant toward her. "Because I intend to make you want to stay." He stepped closer then, into her personal space, but carefully not touching. The restraint in his movement was deliberate, calculated to reassure, yet somehow it made her more aware of him, of the controlled power in his frame and the heat radiating from his body. Marin forced herself to breathe normally. "Is that what you do? Make women want to stay?" "That's your question for tonight." His lips curved slightly. "Choose carefully." She broke off a piece of croissant instead of responding, the buttery layers melting on her tongue. Corrado moved to the coffee maker, his movements precise and efficient as he prepared 2 cups. The morning sun slanted across steel countertops, casting long shadows that stretched between them like reaching fingers. "Did you sleep at all?" he asked, sliding a steaming mug toward her. "You know I didn't. The beds here are very comfortable. I'm sure you would know." The words came out sharper than intended. He paused, cup halfway to his lips. "The guest suites are for protection only. I don't bring women here." Marin busied herself with her coffee, telling herself she didn't care either way. They settled into an oddly domestic silence, the city awakening beyond the windows. She found herself studying his bruised hand when he thought she wasn't looking, wondering whose blood had dried beneath his manicured nails. "I have meetings this morning," he said eventually. "I'll be back by lunch." Should I expect more clothing in my size to mysteriously appear? The research was Lydia's doing. She's thorough. And the security cameras, the guards, the pre-stocked kitchen with my favorite brands. Marin raised an eyebrow. "Was that all Lydia too?" Corrado set down his empty cup with careful precision. "You notice details. Good. That might keep you alive." He straightened his already perfect cuffs. "I'll have someone bring up breakfast in an hour. Try to rest." "I'm not tired." "You're exhausted. It's in the tension around your eyes, the way you're holding your shoulders." His gaze swept over her, clinical yet somehow intimate. "Sleep. You're safe here." He moved toward the elevator, pausing briefly at the threshold. "Remember our deal. 1 question tonight. Make it count." After he left, Marin waited exactly 15 minutes before beginning her systematic exploration of the penthouse. She noted the service entrance hidden behind a panel in the kitchen, counted steps between potential cover, identified which decorative items could serve as weapons if needed. Her mother had taught her to always know her surroundings, and those lessons felt suddenly vital. The layout was efficient but luxurious, clean lines and expensive materials creating an atmosphere of controlled wealth. No family photos, no personal touches beyond carefully curated art. It felt like a beautiful cage, designed to comfort while it contained. She found a leather-bound journal in the desk of her suite, its pages crisp and empty. Settling at the window, Moran began recording everything she'd observed. Guard rotations, security patterns, the way Corrado's organization seemed to operate on unspoken signals. She documented the bruises on his knuckles, the exact time he'd returned, the names she'd overheard. The morning light strengthened as she wrote, transforming the city below from shadowed mystery to stark reality. Marin's pen moved steadily across the pages, capturing details that might mean nothing or everything. The way Lydia's smile never quite reached her eyes, the pattern of calluses on Corrado's trigger finger, the slight Irish lilt in Kincaid's name when they spoke it. Her mother's safety deposit box key felt heavy in her pocket, a secret she hadn't yet decided to share. The memory of Corrado's controlled violence warred with the gentle way he'd pushed the croissant toward her, and she recorded that contradiction too. Understanding him might be the key to surviving this, or it might be the thing that destroyed her. The late morning sun streamed through the penthouse windows as Corrado moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency. Marin watched from her perch at the marble island as he diced vegetables with surgical precision, each cut exact and purposeful. There was something mesmerizing about the way he handled the knife, not as a weapon, but as an extension of himself. "You're staring," he said without looking up. "I'm studying," Marin corrected. "There's a difference." His lips quirked. "Come here then. If you're going to study, do it properly." Marin hesitated only briefly before sliding off the stool. Corrado stepped aside, making space for her at the cutting board. He held out the knife, handle first. "The key is control," he said, positioning himself behind her without touching. "Hold it like this." His hands hovered near hers, demonstrating the grip. "If your hands shake, this stance will steady them." The weight of the knife felt foreign in her palm. "Is this a cooking lesson or survival training?" "Both." His voice was closer to her ear than she'd expected. "Knowledge is protection, fear lives in uncertainty." Marin began cutting, mimicking his precise movements. The rhythmic thud of blade against board filled the kitchen, along with the sizzle of something aromatic in a pan. She was acutely aware of Corrado's presence behind her, the careful space he maintained between them crackling with unspoken tension. "Good," he murmured as she finished the row of even slices. "You're a natural." "At wielding sharp objects? Should I be concerned?" His soft chuckle sent warmth down her spine. "At maintaining control under pressure." He moved away to check the stove, and Marin found herself missing his proximity, even as she told herself not to. The morning stretched on in comfortable domesticity, but she noticed how he positioned himself to watch both the door and windows, how his gaze swept the room at regular intervals. "Do you ever relax?" she asked, setting plates on the island. "I'm very relaxed." He plated the food with the same precision he'd used to cut it. "This is how I prefer to spend my mornings." "Cooking for hostages?" "You're not a hostage." He placed a plate in front of her. "You're under protection." Same cage, different name. His expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "The cage is out there. Here, you have choices." Limited ones, but real ones. He sat beside her rather than across, close enough that their elbows nearly touched. "Every decision you make here is yours. I won't take that from you." They ate in companionable silence, the food perfectly seasoned. Marin found herself watching his hands. Strong, capable hands that could both create and destroy. The bruises from the night before had darkened, telling stories she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. The day passed in a strange dance of proximity and distance. Corrado worked from his office while Marin explored the library, but she felt his attention like a physical thing. When evening fell, they gravitated back to the kitchen, where he prepared coffee with the same focus he gave everything else. "My question for tonight," Marin said, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "What do you regret?" Corrado stilled, his own cup halfway to his lips. For a long moment, he said nothing, and Marin thought he might refuse to answer. When he spoke, his voice was low and controlled. 8 years ago, a rival family took someone under my protection, a woman who worked for me, innocent, uninvolved. They used her as leverage. His knuckles whitened around the cup. I followed protocol, refused to negotiate. She died because I chose strategy over mercy. The weight of his words settled between them like stone. "What was her name?" Marin asked softly. "Sophia." He set down his cup with careful precision. She liked gardenias and collected vintage. Postcards. She trusted me to keep her safe, and I failed her. Is that why you're so adamant about protecting me? That's a second question. But his eyes met hers, dark with meaning. I won't make the same mistake twice. Won't let anyone use you as a pawn in their game. The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. Here was the truth of him, a man haunted by past failures, determined to atone through relentless vigilance. It should have frightened her, this glimpse of his demons. Instead, she found herself wanting to reach across the space between them to offer comfort she wasn't sure he'd accept. A soft knock interrupted the moment. They both turned to see one of the security team standing in the doorway, holding a padded envelope. "This arrived for Ms. Hale," he said, his expression professionally blank. "It's been through preliminary screening." Marin's heart stuttered as she recognized the handwriting on the front. "That's impossible." "What is it?" Corrado was already moving, positioning himself between her and the envelope. "My mother's handwriting." She stood, legs unsteady. "But she's been dead for 3 years." Corrado took the envelope from the guard, examining it with narrowed eyes. After a moment, he placed it carefully on the dining table. "When was it postmarked?" "Last week." The guard shifted uncomfortably. "From a post office in Queens." "Sweep the building again," Corrado ordered. "Full perimeter check. No one in or out without direct authorization." As the guard left, he turned to Marin. "You don't have to open it now." But Marin was already reaching for the envelope, turning it over in her hands. The paper was expensive, the kind her mother would never have used. Yet the writing was unmistakable, each loop and curve exactly as she remembered. "Someone's playing games," Corrado said quietly. "Or my mother left something for me to find." Marin traced her name on the envelope. Something she knew I'd need eventually. Marin's fingers trembled as she broke the envelope's seal. The paper inside was crisp and yellowed with age, folded around something solid. As she opened it, a small brass key slipped into her palm, its worn teeth speaking of decades of use. Below it, in her mother's precise handwriting, was a column of numbers arranged in neat groups of 4. Corrado's reaction was instant and visceral. His entire body went rigid, eyes fixed on the sequence, with an intensity that made Marin's skin prickle. "You recognize this?" she said. It wasn't a question. "Those numbers are part of a system." His voice was careful, measured, one that could destroy half the power structure in New York. "The ledgers everyone's fighting over? Part of them." He took the paper, studying the sequence. "Your mother had access to account codes that could expose everything, money trails, bribes, blackmail." Marin thought of her mother's small apartment, her careful budgeting, her insistence on keeping certain papers locked away. How many secrets had she carried to her grave? "I need to go to this bank," Marin said, gripping the key tighter. "Whatever's in that deposit box, my mother wanted me to find it." "It's not safe," Corrado's jaw tightened. "Kincaid's men will be watching every bank in the city." "Then we go prepared." She met his gaze steadily. "I won't sit here while other people decide my mother's legacy. Either I go with you or I find a way to go alone." Something like respect flickered in his eyes. He studied her for a long moment before nodding once. "We do this my way, full security protocol." He pulled out his phone, sending rapid messages. Within minutes, the penthouse hummed with controlled activity. Lydia arrived first, carrying a metal case of medical supplies that she methodically checked and rechecked. "Pressure bandages, clotting agents, portable suture kit," she listed, packing everything with practiced efficiency. "I'll monitor from the command center. Any sign of trouble, we have trauma teams on standby." Rocco spread blueprints across the dining table, marking routes with quick, precise strokes. "Main entrance here, service exit here, blind spots at these corners." He circled potential ambush points. "We'll need synchronized teams at each checkpoint." Marin watched them work, struck by the lethal choreography of their preparation. This was their world, a place where bank visits required tactical planning and medical contingencies. "Change into something dark," Lydia told her, handing over a bundle of clothes. "Nothing that stands out. Good running shoes, nothing that could trip you up." In her room, Marin stripped off her comfortable sweater and pulled on the outfit Lydia had chosen: black jeans, charcoal sweater, soft-soled boots that laced up tight. Her hands were steady as she braided her hair back, securing every strand that could obstruct her vision. The key felt warm against her palm, weighted with secrets. She slipped it into her pocket, then carefully folded her mother's note and tucked it into her bra, close to her heart. Whatever waited in that deposit box, she would face it with her mother's writing against her skin. When she emerged, Corrado was directing the final preparations. He wore a tailored black suit that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. A shoulder holster disappeared beneath his jacket, and she glimpsed the edge of what might have been body armor at his collar. 3-vehicle convoy, Rocco was saying. Advance team already in position. We have the route locked down, but, he glanced at Marin, things can always go wrong. Then we adapt, Corrado said simply. He turned to Marin. Last chance to wait here where it's safe. No. She straightened her spine. I need to know what my mother was protecting. He nodded, as if he'd expected nothing less. Stay close to me. If I give an order, follow it instantly. No questions, no hesitation. I understand. The private garage was 3 levels below the penthouse, accessed by a secure elevator that required both keycard and fingerprint verification. As they descended, Marin felt the weight of steel and concrete pressing in around them, each floor adding another layer of protection and another barrier to escape. The garage itself was a fortress of reinforced walls and surveillance cameras. 3 identical black SUVs idled in formation, their windows dark and thick enough to stop bullets. Teams of men in tactical gear moved with military precision, checking weapons and communications equipment. Rocco opened the rear door of the middle vehicle, revealing an interior armored like a bank vault. Marin started to slide toward the far seat, but Corrado's hand on her elbow stopped her. Here, he said, guiding her to the middle position. Rather than taking his usual seat facing her, he slid in beside her, close enough that she felt the heat of him along her side. The message was clear. Whatever came for her would have to go through him first. She wasn't sure if that made her feel safer or more afraid. Security doors began cycling shut behind them as the convoy moved into position. Through the bulletproof glass, Marin watched steel barriers seal their exit route, each one another reminder that they were crossing a threshold. After today, there would be no going back to her ordinary life of reception desks and blind dates. Corrado's shoulder pressed against hers as the SUV started forward. She glanced at him, found his eyes already on her, dark with something that might have been concern or might have been determination. Ready? He asked quietly. Marin touched the spot where her mother's note rested against her heart. Yes. The convoy moved out into the morning light, a procession of armored vehicles carrying her toward whatever truth waited in that deposit box. Behind them, the final security door sealed with the finality of a tomb. The bank's marble lobby gleamed under soft lighting, all polished surfaces and hushed voices. Marin's heels clicked against the floor as she followed the manager down a corridor lined with brass-trimmed deposit boxes. Corrado's presence behind her felt like a shield, his attention scanning every corner and doorway. Box 2100 East 7, the manager said, inserting his key. Marin's hands remained steady as she used her mother's key for the second turn. The box slid out with a whisper of metal on metal. Inside lay 3 leather-bound ledgers, their pages thick with handwritten columns of numbers and names. Beneath them, a manila envelope held photographs. Politicians in compromising positions, handshakes in shadowy corners, money changing hands. And at the bottom, a single sheet of paper listed names under the heading Benefactors in her mother's precise script. We need to move, Rocco murmured from his position by the door. Taking too long. Marin had just closed the box when the first shot cracked through the air. Marble chips exploded from the wall beside her head. Corrado's arm swept her behind him as more men poured through the entrance, Kincaid's crew marked by their Celtic tattoos. The violence that followed was brutal in its efficiency. Corrado moved like water, each motion precise and deadly. A gunman's wrist snapped with a wet crack as Corrado disarmed him. Another attacker went down from a kick that looked almost casual but left him gasping on the floor. Back corner, Rocco called, herding Marin behind a bulletproof glass panel designed for teller protection. She clutched the documents to her chest, trying to track the blur of motion that was Corrado systematically dismantling their attackers. 3 minutes. That's all it took for 6 men to end up sprawled across the marble floor. No shots fired after the first. Corrado had made sure they never got the chance. The manager huddled under his desk, whimpering softly. Clear, Rocco announced, already coordinating with their outside team through his earpiece. But we need to move before reinforcements arrive. Corrado nodded sharply and disappeared into the restroom. Marin followed, worried he'd been injured. She found him washing his hands with mechanical precision, the water running pink. His knuckles were scraped but otherwise unharmed. The blood wasn't his. She watched his methodical cleaning, the way he counted under his breath as he scrubbed each finger. It felt like a ritual, like penance for necessary violence. When he caught her gaze in the mirror, something vulnerable flickered across his face before disappearing behind his usual mask. "The documents?" he asked quietly. "Here." She held up the ledgers and photos. "All of it." Rocco had a portable scanner ready in the car. They worked quickly while the convoy circled the block, creating digital copies before sealing the originals in a hidden compartment beneath the seat. Marin's hands shook slightly as she handled the papers that had gotten her mother killed. The SUV stopped at a red light, and suddenly the weight of everything crashed over her. The gunfire, the violence, her mother's secrets. She drew a shaky breath. Corrado's hand found hers in the dim interior. He lifted her knuckles to his mouth but paused, waiting. The choice was hers. Marin met his eyes and nodded once. His lips brushed her skin, soft and deliberate. The kiss deepened as she turned toward him, her free hand finding his jaw. There was nothing rushed about it, no desperate grab in the aftermath of violence. Just slow exploration anchored in mutual consent and building heat. When they broke apart, both were breathing unevenly. Rocco kept his eyes firmly on the road ahead, though Marin caught the hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. The penthouse elevator felt smaller than usual as they ascended, the LED panel casting intermittent shadows across their faces. Marin's lips still tingled from the kiss. She watched the floor numbers tick upward, hyper-aware of Corrado beside her. He leaned his forehead against the cool glass, eyes closed, for just a moment. It was the first crack she'd seen in his composure since the shooting started. His breath fogged the surface in short bursts, matching her own unsteady rhythm. The document sat heavy in her bag, a weight of secrets and power she was only beginning to understand. But in that moment, watching Corrado's reflection in the elevator glass, she was more focused on the way his hand kept finding hers, their fingers intertwining like they'd always meant to fit together. The LED display flickered, casting shadows that made the small space feel both intimate and exposed. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The violence in the bank had revealed one side of him, but this quiet moment showed another. The man who waited for permission, who turned brutality into protection, who washed away blood with counted breaths. Marin squeezed his hand, and he squeezed back. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The Mafia patriarch and the bookish receptionist, bound by ledgers and blood, and a kiss that tasted like beginning. The elevator hummed softly as it carried them upward, city lights winking through the glass walls. Corrado's shoulder brushed against Marin's, the touch light but deliberate in the confined space. "I don't sleep much," he said quietly, breaking the silence. His reflection ghosted against the dark glass. "Haven't since I was young." Marin turned to study his profile. "Why?" "The doors used to lock from the outside." His jaw tightened. "My father believed isolation bred strength, every night, sealed in until morning. No matter what happened, no matter who needed help." The admission hung between them, heavy with unspoken pain. Marin's hand found his, fingers interlacing. "I made a vow back then," he continued, voice low, "to become the kind of monster who could protect what matters, the kind no one could lock away." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I succeeded." "You're not a monster," Marin whispered. "No?" His smile held no warmth. "You saw what I did at the bank." "I saw someone protecting me." She squared her shoulders. "I know about protection and isolation." Corrado waited, giving her space to continue. "All my life, people made sure I knew my body was wrong. Too big, too soft." Her voice stayed steady. "The jokes, the pranks, like tonight at the restaurant. I decided young that I wouldn't give any part of myself away until someone chose me, really chose me, not settled for me." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You're a virgin." "Yes." She lifted her chin. "I won't apologize for waiting." "Never apologize for knowing your worth." His hand tightened on hers. "I choose you, Marin, not settling. Choosing." The elevator lights flickered, then died. The cab jerked to a stop between floors, throwing them against the wall. Marin's heart hammered as darkness pressed in. "Stay calm," Corrado murmured, already moving to shield her. "Emergency power should be—" The backup systems kicked in, bathing them in dim amber light. The elevator groaned back to life, resuming its climb. "If this is our first time," Marin said once her pulse steadied, "it happens on my terms. Always." The word held the weight of a vow. The doors finally opened onto the penthouse level. Corrado immediately issued orders through his phone, doubling the guard rotation and demanding system checks. But he kept his movements slow and visible as he guided Marin to the living room. Instead of looming over her, he chose a seat where she could track his position. The city sprawled beyond the windows, a tapestry of lights and shadows. Neither spoke for several minutes, letting the tension from the elevator settle. "Tell me about the doors," Marin said softly. Corrado's hands clasped between his knees. "I was 8 the first time. Punishment for helping our cook's daughter escape my father's advances. 3 days alone." "God." Marin's throat tightened. By 12, I'd learned to pick any lock, disable any camera. His smile turned sharp. By 15, I was better at violence than my father. He never touched another girl under our roof. Marin moved closer on the couch until their thighs touched. "And the insomnia?" "Old habits. Can't sleep unless I know every exit, every threat." He glanced at her. "Every person worth protecting." "Is that what I am? Someone to protect?" "You're someone to cherish." His voice roughened. "Someone to choose every day." Heat bloomed in Marin's chest. She reached for his hand again, marveling at how natural it felt now. His calluses caught against her soft palm. "What about you?" he asked. "Tell me about waiting." "The first boy who kissed me did it on a dare." The old hurt had faded to a dull ache. His friends paid him $20. "After that, I decided my first belonged to me, not to anyone's cruel games." "Good." Corrado's thumb traced her knuckles. "You deserve someone who sees you clearly." "Do you?" She met his gaze. "See me? I see strength that doesn't need violence, beauty that doesn't bend to others' standards." His free hand curved around her jaw. A woman who makes choices instead of accepting scraps. The city's rhythm had quieted to a distant pulse, most windows dark now. Emergency lights cast soft shadows across Corrado's features, softening the usual sharp edges. "I'm not afraid of you," Marin realized aloud. "No?" "No. I'm afraid of how much I want." A quiet beep cut through the hush. Corrado's phone screen lit up with a coded alert, his expression instantly shifting to steel as he read the message. The generator's steady hum seemed louder in the dimmed lights, a mechanical heartbeat warning of sabotage within their fortress walls. His hand tightened on hers, protection and possession in equal measure. But he didn't move to leave her side, didn't break the bubble of trust they'd built in whispered confessions. Whatever threat approached, they would face it together. The man who learned to break locks, and the woman who chose her own path. Outside, the city continued its restless dance of light and shadow, unaware of the storm gathering in the penthouse above. Inside, 2 people who had learned different lessons about survival sat connected by clasped hands and shared secrets, waiting for the next move in a game they'd been pulled into by luck and ledgers and a mother's final gift. The generator hummed. The emergency lights cast amber shadows. And Corrado's phone continued its silent warning of betrayal somewhere in the floors below. The penthouse doors exploded inward with a deafening boom. Smoke billowed through the foyer, thick and acrid. Through the haze, Marin saw Lydia crumple, blood darkening her silk blouse where shrapnel had torn through. "Med team now!" Corrado's voice cut through the chaos. He'd already positioned emergency medical staff nearby, another layer of his endless contingencies. 2 medics materialized from the service entrance, equipment ready. They worked with practiced efficiency, assessing Lydia's wounds while applying pressure bandages. Her face was pale but composed as they stabilized her. "Just a scratch," Lydia insisted through gritted teeth, though the spreading red told a different story. Corrado moved like a shadow through the smoke, checking each room with lethal precision. Rocco coordinated with security through his earpiece. Voice clipped as he ordered stairwells sealed and elevators locked down. "East corridor clear," crackled a voice over the radio. "West clear," came another. "Movement in the south service hall." A scuffle erupted, followed by the sound of someone being forcibly restrained. Seconds later, security dragged a familiar figure into the main room. Harper. Marin's stomach dropped. Her office friend looked terrible, mascara streaked, designer clothes rumpled, trembling so hard she could barely stand. "Found her trying to access the service exit," the guard reported. "Had this." He held up a phone with a messaging app open to Kincaid's name. "I'm sorry," Harper sobbed, looking at Marin. "I'm so sorry. The gambling debts. He said he'd help. I didn't know what else to do." "Start from the beginning," Corrado ordered, his voice arctic. Harper flinched but spoke rapidly. "Kincaid approached me 3 months ago. Said he'd clear my debts if I fed him information about the building, security rotations, access codes. Then last week he wanted me to set up Marin. The blind date. Marin's voice was flat. Harper nodded miserably. He knew about the ledgers somehow. Wanted you visible, exposed. The joke was his idea. Get you alone at the restaurant where his people could watch. I thought. She swallowed hard. I thought it would just be embarrassing. Not this. Never this. And now? Corrado's question carried deadly weight. He's using me as bait again. Told me to leave the service door unlocked tonight or he'd expose everything. My debts, my family's business troubles, all of it. Harper's eyes found Marin's desperate. You have to run! He won't stop! He'll keep using people against you until— Enough! Corrado's hand twitched toward his weapon. No! Marin stepped between them. No more blood tonight. She betrayed you, Corrado growled. Led Kincaid right to us. Because he trapped her first, Marin turned to Harper. How many others? How many people is he controlling through debt and blackmail? Dozens, maybe hundreds. Harper wiped her face. He builds webs of leverage. Each victim becomes another tool to ensnare someone else. It never ends. It ends tonight. Marin faced Corrado. Not with more violence. Not with me hiding while other women bleed in my place. We end the cycle itself. Corrado studied her face. You have a plan. The ledgers. He wants them so badly. Let's give him exactly what he wants. A cold smile curved Marin's lips. On our terms. Understanding dawned in Corrado's eyes. He activated his comm. Rocco, prep for midnight movement, full convoy river route, and get me Detective Chen's direct line. While Rocco coordinated, the medics finished stabilizing Lydia. She needs proper medical care, one reported. The shrapnel missed major vessels, but there's risk of infection. Private clinic, Corrado ordered. Double security detail. He squeezed his sister's hand briefly. Try not to terrorize the nurses too much. No promises, Lydia managed a weak smile. Just end this bastard. Harper watched the flurry of activity, still trembling. What happens to me? You help us set the trap, Marin said. Then you get a fresh start. Somewhere safe, debts cleared. She looked at Corrado, who nodded slightly. Why? Harper whispered. After what I did. Because breaking the cycle means helping people climb out, not pushing them deeper in. Marin's voice was firm. Now tell us everything you know about Kincaid's operation. Every detail matters. For the next 20 minutes, Harper talked while Rocco's team prepped. Access points, meeting locations, key players in Kincaid's web. Corrado recorded it all, occasionally asking sharp questions that revealed the tactical mind behind his controlled exterior. At 11:45, Lydia was carefully transferred to a medical transport, her security detail already in position. The penthouse had been swept and secured, evidence documented for the coming confrontation. Marin changed into dark clothes that would blend with shadows, tucking the ledgers into a reinforced bag. Her mother's note stayed close to her heart, a reminder of why this fight mattered. Last chance to reconsider, Corrado said softly as they headed to the garage. I can end him quickly, keep you safe. I am safe. Marin took his hand. Because I'm choosing to fight back, not hide, because we're ending this together. His fingers tightened on hers. In the dim garage lighting, his expression held equal measures of pride and worry. Together, he agreed. They entered the lead vehicle at 11:57, the convoy forming up behind them with military precision. Ahead lay the river docks, dark water and darker intentions waiting for midnight's encounter. But in the back seat, Marin felt oddly calm. She had spent years choosing her own path, refusing to let others define her worth. Tonight was no different. The engines hummed to life in perfect synchronization. Armored vehicles rolled forward, carrying a trap built of ledgers and leverage toward its final spring. And in the lead car, a woman who had learned to value herself sat beside a man who had learned to protect without possessing, both knowing that true strength sometimes meant choosing a harder path than violence. The docks materialized through sheets of rain, floodlights casting silver-white beams across wet concrete and rusted shipping containers. Marin watched Rocco's team position cameras and recording equipment with practiced efficiency, every angle covered, every escape route monitored. The air tasted like metal and brine. Corrado stood beside her, still as stone, only his eyes moving as he tracked shadows and sightlines. His shoulder brushed hers whenever the wind gusted, a reflexive shield against the elements. Water beaded on his leather jacket, each drop catching light like scattered diamonds. "Remember," he murmured, "let him think he has control. The recording is what matters." Marin nodded, the ledgers heavy in her hands. Her mother's handwriting burned against her skin, where the note remained tucked close to her heart. The rain intensified, drumming against metal roofs and pooling in uneven concrete. Movement flickered above, Kincaid's shooters taking position on the catwalks, their weapons gleaming dully. In response, red targeting dots appeared on their chests. Corrado's snipers, keeping the balance of power delicate but clear. Kincaid emerged from between containers, tall and sharp-featured, flanked by guards. His smile was razor-thin. "The lovely Ms. Hale, and here I thought Viscari was keeping you all to himself." "The ledgers," Marin said steadily. "That's what this is about." "Oh, but it's about so much more." Kincaid's eyes glittered. "Did he tell you how long he's been watching you? How many strings he's been pulling?" Corrado tensed beside her. Marin's pulse quickened. "Your cozy little apartment building," Kincaid continued. "He's owned it through shell companies for months. Started protecting you after noticing some suspicious tales following you home. Very thorough, our Corrado. Very possessive." The words hit like ice water. Owned, watched, protected without her knowledge or consent. The trust she'd been building cracked along fault lines she hadn't known existed. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. Corrado's silence was answer enough. "I made sure you were safe," he finally said, voice low and intent. "I saw threats closing in, and decided to handle it yourself instead of warning me." The betrayal tasted bitter. "You watched me like I was property to be managed. Marin..." She set the bank key on a nearby crate with precise movements. "No more choices made for me." Kincaid's smile widened. "Trouble in paradise?" The first shot cracked across the docks like thunder. Smoke bombs burst in coordinated clouds, thick gray billowing between containers. More shots followed, the sound bouncing off metal walls until directions blurred. Through the chaos, Marin glimpsed Kincaid, melting away into the artificial fog, taking advantage of the confusion. Corrado's men moved to pursue, but he halted them with a sharp gesture. His eyes never left the space where Marin had stood. She was already walking away, each step measured despite the trembling in her hands. Rain plastered her clothes to her skin, but she barely felt it. The trust she'd begun to build, the connection that had sparked between them, it felt hollow now, tainted by the revelation of surveillance and control. A black sedan waited at the edge of the docks, door held open by one of Rocco's men. Marin slid into the back seat, phone already in hand. "Ms. Hale," the driver began. "Take me home." Her voice was steady despite the storm inside her chest. "And call ahead to the security team at my building. Tell them to stand down. Their services are no longer required." Behind her, through the rain-streaked rear window, Corrado remained motionless in the floodlight's glare. His usual commanding presence seemed diminished somehow, uncertainty visible in the set of his shoulders. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked lost. The sedan pulled away from the docks, wipers beating a rhythm against the downpour. Water traced patterns on the windows like tears, distorting the world outside into a blur of lights and shadows. In the distance, police sirens began to wail, drawn by the sounds of gunfire. Marin watched the docks recede in the side mirror until they disappeared into the rain. Her mother's note pressed against her skin, a reminder of how this had all started, with trust betrayed and choices made in shadow, the very things she'd sworn to stand against. The city stretched around them, a maze of wet streets and neon reflecting off puddles. Other cars moved like ghosts through the storm, everyone rushing toward their own destinations, their own decisions. Marin's fingers traced patterns on the foggy window, marking time with each intersection passed. Her phone buzzed, Corrado's name on the screen. She turned it face down on the seat beside her. Another buzz followed, then another, but she didn't reach for it. The choice to answer or ignore had to be hers alone. The driver maintained professional silence as they navigated through increasingly familiar streets. Buildings she passed every day emerged from the rain. The corner store where she bought her morning coffee, the small park where she sometimes read during lunch breaks, the pharmacy where she picked up prescriptions. Normal places, everyday places, all of them, watched and noted in reports she'd never seen. How many cameras had tracked her movements? How many eyes had followed her daily routines? The questions multiplied with each block they covered, each one weighted with implications of control and surveillance. The sedan slowed as they approached her building. Light spilled from the lobby windows, and she could see Corrado's posted guards, men she'd grown almost comfortable with, waiting in their usual positions. One stepped forward as the car stopped, but she shook her head through the window. "Stand down," she said clearly as she stepped out into the rain. "Your services are no longer needed here." They hesitated, hands touching earpieces, no doubt receiving contrary orders. But something in her expression must have convinced them. They nodded, melting away into the night like they'd never been there at all. Marin stood in the rain for a moment, key fob clutched in her hand, looking up at the familiar facade of her building. Her home. Only now she knew it had never truly been just hers. It had been another piece in Corrado's careful arrangement of her life, another facet of control masked as protection. Rain dripped from Marin's clothes as she stepped into her building's lobby, leaving small puddles on the polished floor. The guards who had been fixtures for months now stood uncertainly by the entrance, caught between her dismissal and whatever orders buzzed in their earpieces. "I meant what I said," she stated firmly. "I stand down." They exchanged glances before nodding and stepping aside. The lobby felt different now. Every security camera, every locked door, every subtle improvement she'd attributed to building management took on new meaning. The elevator ride to her floor was a study in revelation. She noticed the upgraded emergency phone, the smoother operation of the car, the fresh paint that had appeared after a weekend she'd been away, small changes that had made her safer, all orchestrated without her knowledge. Her apartment door looked the same, but now she saw the reinforced hinges, the quality of the lock. Inside, she flicked on lights and really looked at her space. The windows had been quietly replaced with impact-resistant glass. The Wi-Fi router was a professional-grade security model. Then she saw it, a slight discoloration in the wall paint near her bookshelf. Her fingers found the edge of a small panel she'd never noticed before. It swung open to reveal a wall safe with a keypad. Her birthday worked on the first try. Inside, she found a thick folder containing surveillance photos, but not of her. They showed men watching her building, following her to work, taking pictures of their own. Each image was time-stamped, accompanied by incident reports detailing how these threats were redirected. Receipt after receipt documented quiet interventions. A locksmith called when her door showed signs of tampering, groceries delivered on nights she worked late, a car, service that picked her up during dangerous storms. Even her favorite coffee shop's sudden improvement in security cameras had been his doing. What she'd interpreted as ownership was something else entirely. A penance of protection, executed with obsessive attention to detail, but careful never to intrude on her life directly. A soft knock at her door made her pulse jump. Through the peephole, she saw Corrado standing in the hallway, hands visible and empty at his sides. He made no move to enter. "The ledgers," he said, voice rough with emotion he usually kept contained. "I can have them handed to a federal contact by morning. Clean chain of custody, no traces leading back to you. You'll be clear of all of it." Marin studied him through the peephole. His usual precise control looked frayed at the edges. The rain had soaked through his suit, but he seemed indifferent to his own discomfort. "Prove it," she said through the door. "Show me exactly how we make this end." He outlined the basics of a plan, using Harper's cooperation to set up Kincaid, making him think he could still win while building an airtight case against him. Marin opened the door but didn't invite him in. They stood in the threshold, the hallway light casting long shadows between them. "Harper's text messages would confirm the meet," he explained. "We send Kincaid one page from the ledgers, the one showing his own banker's involvement. He'll have to respond." "Recording devices," Marin added, thinking it through. "Multiple angles, clean audio, and decoy briefcases to make him show his hand." Corrado nodded, a hint of pride showing through his carefully neutral expression. "The federal contact is legitimate. One signature from you transferring custody of evidence, and you're legally clear." They spent the next 45 minutes working out details. Harper would send a carefully worded text suggesting she had more to trade. The partial ledger page would go out with a GPS pin for the meeting point. Everything would be documented, witnessed, and properly handled for maximum legal impact. Marin saw the logic of it, how it would end not just Kincaid's immediate threat, but his entire leverage system. No more women caught in debt traps, no more forced betrayals. She watched Corrado make calls, his tone clipped and professional as he set pieces in motion. He never crossed her threshold without invitation, maintaining the distance she'd imposed. But his eyes kept finding her, checking her reactions, seeking some sign of what she was thinking. The plan came together with military precision. Recording devices were prepared, decoy briefcases acquired, and a clean chain of custody established for all evidence. Federal contacts were quietly alerted to stand by. At precisely midnight, they sent the first text to Kincaid, a GPS pin and a photo of the ledger page that would bait the trap. Marin's phone buzzed almost immediately with his response. The location he suggested was back, at the river, in a different section of the docks than their earlier confrontation. The timestamp he proposed was less than 2 hours away. Corrado looked at her then, really looked at her with none of his usual barriers in place. "Your choice," he said quietly. "All of it. Your choice." The rain continued outside her windows, but its rhythm felt different now. Less like tears and more like the steady beating of a clock counting down to decision time. The folder of surveillance photos sat open on her coffee table, each image a testament to protection offered without demand for recognition. The wall safe stood open, its contents telling a story not of possession but of dedication, a dangerous man using his power to create safety rather than fear. Every receipt, every report, every quiet intervention had been done not to control her life, but to ensure she could live it freely. Harper's confirmation text came through. Meet coordinates received. Standing by. The pieces were in place. The trap was set. Now they just needed Marin's decision to spring it. The mist settled like a gauzy veil over the docks, droplets catching in the harsh spotlights. Marin's shoes made no sound on the wet concrete as she took position behind a shipping container, Harper trembling beside her with the recorder ready. Through the haze, Kincaid's silhouette emerged, flanked by fewer men than before. He'd learned caution after the last encounter. What he didn't know was that Corrado's teams had already sealed every escape route. Boats idled in the harbor, engines hushed. On the surrounding rooftops, Rocco's people neutralized rival snipers with silent efficiency. "You have what we discussed?" Kincaid's voice carried across the empty space, accent thicker with tension. Corrado stood alone in the open, seemingly relaxed, but coiled tight as a spring. "The page that names your banker, right here." He held up a manila envelope. "But first, a conversation about leverage." Harper's breath hitched. Marin squeezed her arm gently, nodding toward the recorder. This was the moment to break the chain, to free every woman Kincaid had trapped with debt and threats. "Start from the beginning," Marin whispered. "Every name, every amount." Harper's voice shook at first, but steadied as she read through the list of women Kincaid had ensnared. Each name was a story of manipulation, of choices stripped away by calculated pressure. The recorder caught it all. Dates, amounts, methods of coercion. Evidence that would stand up in court. Kincaid's attention fixed on the envelope, greed making him sloppy. He didn't notice the subtle movements in the shadows as Corrado's people tightened the net. 3 of Kincaid's men shifted uneasily, reading the changing odds. "Enough games," Kincaid snapped. "The page, now. First, you'll hear what this costs you." Corrado's voice went winter cold. "Every debt you've used to control women is void. Every threat ends tonight. Those who testify walk. Free. Those who resist don't walk at all." The first shot came from above, Rocco taking out Kincaid's hidden backup. The fight erupted in controlled bursts, Corrado's teams moving with practiced coordination. They separated the ones they needed alive, witnesses, account holders, key lieutenants, from those too dangerous to leave breathing. Marin watched Corrado move through the chaos with lethal grace. He wasn't performing now, wasn't holding back. This was who he truly was, precise violence in defense of what he considered his to protect. But even at his most brutal, he kept checking her position, ensuring no danger came near her corner of the docks. When it ended, the mist had turned pink in places. Kincaid knelt with zip-tied hands, raging impotently as federal agents emerged from concealment to secure evidence and suspects. Harper's recorded testimony was already being uploaded to secure servers, copies distributed to multiple agencies. In the aftermath, Corrado crossed to where Marin stood. His knuckles were scraped raw, his suit spattered, but his eyes held nothing but uncertain hope as he knelt on the wet boards before her. "Everything I am, everything I control, it's yours if you want it," he said quietly. "But only if you choose it freely. You're the one line I won't cross." Marin studied him, this dangerous man who killed without hesitation, but trembled at the thought of crossing her boundaries, who had spent months protecting her from shadows without demanding recognition, who knelt now, offering power instead of wielding it. "I choose you," she said clearly, "on my terms, equal partners." His exhale was shaky with relief. When he stood, he didn't crowd her space, didn't assume touch was permitted. She was the one who stepped forward, who brought her hand to his cheek in full view of everyone still unseen. Later, in her apartment, consent was explicit at every step. His hands shook with restraint as he undressed her, checking each new touch was welcome. She guided him, showing what she wanted, how she wanted to be touched. When he finally entered her, the tenderness in his eyes made her breath catch. "Perfect," he whispered against her skin. "So perfect for me." Afterward, he held her close, but not confining, his heartbeat steady under her ear. They talked quietly about practical things: Lydia's recovery timeline, Harper's restitution plan under Marin's supervision, the building's transfer into her name. "No more ownership without my knowledge," she insisted. "No more secrets," he agreed. "Everything open between us." Outside her windows, the city sparkled like scattered stars. Inside, they built something new, a partnership where his lethality created the space for her softness, where protection meant enhancement rather than constraint. In the weeks that followed, the changes rippled outward. Lydia healed quickly, already planning expanded medical support for their people. Harper worked steadily under Marin's guidance, making amends through practical service rather than shame. The building's deed arrived in Marin's name, accompanied by a key to Corrado's penthouse, an invitation rather than an assumption. On a clear evening, they stood on his rooftop terrace as sunset painted the skyline in molten gold. No witnesses but the city itself as they exchanged quiet vows, his to always protect without possessing, hers to choose him freely every day. To the world he remained death with a precise hand, but to her he was gentle dawnlight and careful touches, strength turned to shelter rather than shadow. They built their future in that contrast, public power and private tenderness, ferocity and faith, a love story written in both blood and light.